Welcome to the Ukraine Chronicles. As the Ukraine Chronicles family, we continue to bring you the hottest news from Ukraine's liberation struggle. You can increase your support to the heroic Ukrainian soldiers in this brave struggle by liking our video and subscribing to our channel. Russia's most fundamental problems on the Ukrainian front cannot be resolved. After the heavy losses in Ukraine, leader Vladimir Putin started to sacrifice the Russian commanders again. But this time, one of the top figures in the command of the Russian armed forces was fired by Putin. The Russian Ministry of Defense took new decisions after the last Russian army suffered heavy losses in Ukraine. The senior Russian colonel was dismissed after it sparked unconventional criticism of the military's incompetence. In the Russian public, the dismissal of Colonel General Rustam Muradov was the highest ever dismissal of a Russian officer in 2023. According to reports on Russian social media, it is not surprising that the Russian Ministry of Defense dismissed Colonel General Rustam Muradov, the head of the Russian Army's Eastern Group in Ukraine. Muradov's command of the Eastern Group has resulted in significant losses in recent months as it has repeatedly failed and ill-planned attacks on the town of Volodar in the Donetsk Oblast. Also, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu made a rare trip to the front lines in Ukraine last month to visit Muradov and some of his troops. There were also sources who thought that Muradov's dismissal was evident in this visit of the Russian Defense Minister. In the most recent UK Ministry of Defense intelligence briefing, it was reported that Russian commentators, including Muradov's own soldiers, had widely condemned these operations. The dismissal of Muradov, a veteran military commander with experience in Syria and the southern Caucasus, offers a rare glimpse into the internal repercussions of the Russian military's failure to gain any significant ground in its months-long offensive in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. On the other hand, an official statement that the Russian colonel was fired came from an important source, a source in Russia's Eastern Military District, and a source in the Russian Armed Forces General Staff announced that Muradov has been officially dismissed from command in the Eastern Military District. Sources suggest that Muradov's resignation was directly linked to failures around Volodar. At the peak of the Volodar offensive in February, troops under Muradov's command lost 103 pieces of military equipment, including 36 tanks, in 3 days, according to the Dutch group, which uses open-source data to track Russia's material losses. At the same time, only 20 units of Ukrainian military equipment were destroyed, including 2 tanks. Muradov repeatedly attacked the Russian army in small mechanized formations in minefields, open terrain. Even soldiers serving under Muradov's command criticized his leadership and his disrespect for soldiers' lives. Particularly high casualty rates were reported in the 55th Guards Marine Brigade and the 40th Marine Brigade near Volodar. A surviving 55th Guards Marine Corps Marine said in February that Russia's casualties were so severe that only 8 remained in one of the unit's companies. It was reported that he wished he had been taken prisoner by 7x7 and never returned. Muradov was suspended for being a crazy commander who could order soldiers to go to certain death. Many people complained about it. The returns around Volodar were not the last military defeats suffered by troops under Muradov's command. The independent Russian media outlet reported last week, citing a source from the General Staff. On the other hand, it is not known whether Muradov will be appointed to another military post, and it is not clear who will replace him. So who is the top Russian general who was fired from his post with a single decision of Putin? Appointed head of Russia's Eastern Military District on October 5th, 2022, Muradov became one of President Vladimir Putin's top commanders in Ukraine. He was previously posted as a military advisor in Syria, and for more than a year served in Russian peacekeeping missions in the disputed South Caucasus region of Nagorno-Karabakh. It is thought that due to the alleged mistakes of this commander, all the balances have changed in Volodar, and the Ukrainians have taken over this city. In fact, the Russian attacks on the strategic coal mining town of Volodar in January and early February caused heavy losses of people and equipment. In one notorious incident, dozens of Russian tanks were reportedly destroyed after being ordered to advance in single file due to a lack of demining equipment. This mistake was attributed to the Russian commander Muradov. On the other hand, the successful capture of Volodar could have allowed the Russian army to bypass a large fortified Ukrainian area near the city of Avdiivka, which would facilitate a wider Russian offensive in the Donbass. By contrast, Russia's armed forces are caught in heavy clashes and are unlikely to make any significant military breakthroughs. In other words, given their limited offensive potential, it is not thought that the Russian army can provide sufficient advantage on any front. With such huge problems for the Russian army, if you remember, A total of 10 leading Russian generals have been killed in the war since Putin's invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th. Also, probably at least 6 Russian commanders were dismissed due to the persistent failure of the Russian armed forces to achieve their goals in the invasion of Ukraine. Colonel General Alexander Chaiko was dismissed as the Eastern Military District Commander in May 2022. Colonel General Alexander Zuravlev, who has commanded the Western Military District since 2018, was dismissed on July the 31st, 2022, after General Alexander Vladimirovich Dvornikov was given overall command of the operation in Ukraine. General Sergei Surovkin took over the command of the southern group of forces from General Gennady Valerievich Zhidko. These dismissals are compounded by at least 10 Russian generals killed on the battlefield in Ukraine. The cumulative impact on command coherence likely adds to Russia's tactical and operational challenges, its huge problems. In this regard, Putin awaits a swift capture of Kiev, while Russian military efforts appear to be plagued by setbacks, fierce resistance from the Ukrainian armed forces, and the loss of large numbers of soldiers and equipment. As a result, Putin has often changed the target of the war and has recently focused his army's attention on the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. Ukraine's takeover of the war has led to the consternation of Kremlin allies and occasional public mockery of Russia's top officials, including over the weekend by 2 of President Vladimir Putin's allies. We can say that the heavy casualties of the Ukrainian army, especially in the attacks on the Russian base in Crimea, laid the groundwork for a series of humiliations. It is clear that the main reason behind the dismissal of Moscow's 6 commanders was Russia's poor performance in the Ukrainian war. However, Vladimir Putin cannot solve this problem. Given the war's progress, military experts say it will be difficult for any officer to make a difference, even with commander changes, given the structural problems the Russian military is embedded in. As a result, it seems unlikely that Russian President Vladimir Putin will overcome this Ukraine impasse. Thank you for watching us.